When this veteran sang his heart-wrenching tribute to fallen soldiers, Donald Trump's unexpected response left the entire audience in stunned silence. The ballroom glittered under the soft, golden glow of crystal chandeliers, casting a warm light over a sea of distinguished guests. The annual Freedom and Honor Gala, held at the renowned Beverly Wilshire Hotel in Los Angeles, had attracted politicians, celebrities, and business tycoons, all gathered to support wounded veterans. Servers moved gracefully between tables, refilling champagne glasses, while hushed conversations filled the air. At the head of the room, a long elevated stage framed by deep blue velvet curtains stood as the centerpiece. A massive American flag proudly hung behind it, its stars catching the light every time the fabric rippled slightly from the air vents above. President Donald Trump, seated at the front table, adjusted his tie, listening intently as the evening's MC, a retired four-star general, shared stories of resilience from soldiers who had sacrificed more than most could comprehend. Trump, known for his commanding presence, sat with a sense of attentiveness, though there was something flickering in his expression, a rare moment of quiet reflection. As the speeches continued, guests applauded politely, offering smiles and nods at the appropriate times, but there was a predictability to it all. They had attended galas before, heard stirring speeches, made generous donations, and gone home feeling like they had done their part. Then came a pause. The MC cleared his throat, scanning the room before speaking. "Tonight," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "we have a very special guest, someone who has seen more than most of us could ever imagine and lived to tell about it." The energy in the room shifted instantly. Conversation stopped. Glasses were gently set back on the linen-draped tables. Even Trump leaned forward slightly, his attention sharpening. The general continued, "Sergeant Lucas Barrett served 2 tours in Iraq and 1 in Afghanistan. He was awarded the Purple Heart for injuries sustained during an ambush outside Kandahar. But what he's about to share with us tonight goes beyond the battlefield. Please give a warm welcome to a true American." Polite applause rippled through the room as a tall, broad-shouldered man in his late 50s walked toward the stage. His limp was slight but noticeable, and the crisp navy blue suit he wore couldn't quite conceal the stiffness in his movements, a reminder of the injuries that had nearly taken his life. Lucas Barrett stepped up to the microphone, adjusted the mic stand with a steady hand, and scanned a room. He took in the crowd, powerful men and women, some of whom had sent soldiers like him to war. Taking a deep breath, he began to speak. But no one was ready for what happened next. A brief moment of silence fell over the room. It wasn't the usual awkward quiet that comes with uncertainty. It was something much heavier. Anticipation. The kind that made people sit a little straighter, lean in a little closer. Lucas Barrett allowed the quiet to linger. He wasn't the type to rush his words. Years of service had taught him that the impact of a message wasn't in how quickly it was delivered, but in how deeply it was felt. He adjusted the microphone again, his fingers brushing against the cold metal stand, and his gaze flicked over the crowd, senators, CEOs, Hollywood elites, before landing on President Trump, who was watching him intently. "I want to thank you all for being here tonight," Lucas said finally, his voice even and steady. "I know these kinds of events are about raising money, showing support, standing behind the men and women who serve this country. But I also know that for a lot of people, it's easy to forget what that really means." The room remained silent. He exhaled slowly. "I don't say that with bitterness," he continued. "I say it because I've been there. I've seen what war does to men. I've seen what it takes from them. I've seen the ones who never came home. And for a long time, I didn't know how to carry that. But one night, in a hospital bed, with more broken bones than I could count and a future that felt uncertain at best, I did the only thing I could do." He paused, glancing down at his hands before looking up again. "I wrote a song." A murmur rippled through the audience, not out of doubt, but because no one had expected it. "It's not a song about me," he clarified, shaking his head. "It's about the ones who never got the chance to stand on a stage like this. The ones who never made it past 20, the ones who fought alongside me but never made it home." He reached into his pocket, pulling out a small, creased piece of paper, worn at the edges from being unfolded and refolded countless times. I wrote this for them, and tonight I want to share it with you. He nodded toward the pianist in the corner, and the soft, mournful notes of a single piano chord filled the air. Lucas closed his eyes, took a breath, and began to sing. Within seconds, the entire room would be fighting back tears. I was just a young man. I'd raise my hands or fight through the flame, left my home, left my past behind for the red, white, and blue. I laid it all on the line, marching through the desert, through the rain and snow. Brothers beside me, never standing alone. We bled for promise, for a flag that waves, for the land of the free and the home of the brave. The first notes of Lucas Barrett's voice carried through the ballroom, deep, steady, and filled with something that made people hold their breath. It wasn't just the melody, it was the weight behind it. The final note hung in the air, fading into a silence so thick it was almost suffocating. Then, applause, raw, real, and loud. It wasn't the polite clapping expected at fancy galas. People stood, some clapping, others wiping away silent tears. A few simply stood there, hands pressed together, as if they were still absorbing what they had just heard. But amidst the ovation, one man remained seated, President Trump. His hands remained clasped together, slightly tightened, and his gaze never left Lucas. Slowly, he stood, but what happened next left the entire room speechless. The applause thundered through the ballroom, but Trump didn't acknowledge it right away. He remained still, his hands slowly unfolding as he exhaled. His gaze never leaving Lucas Barrett, he walked toward the stage, not with quick, rehearsed movements, but with deliberate, measured steps, steps that carried weight, signaling something real. The room watched, holding its collective breath, as Trump reached the stage. His face wasn't the one people were used to seeing, there were no grins or nods to the cameras. His expression was serious, somber even. Lucas Barrett, still standing at the microphone, met his gaze. Neither man spoke. The cameras clicked, capturing the moment. Then, Trump did something no one expected. He extended his hand. Lucas hesitated for just a second before grasping it. The handshake was firm, lingering. It wasn't a photo op moment. It was unspoken, understood only by men who knew the true meaning of sacrifice. Then, in a rare moment of vulnerability, Trump placed his other hand on Lucas's shoulder. A hush fell over the room. The cameras kept rolling, but no one moved or spoke. Finally, Trump leaned in slightly, speaking just loud enough for the microphone to catch his words. "They'll never be forgotten." Lucas swallowed hard, his grip tightening for a brief second before he nodded, not out of formality, but out of understanding. Trump let go, turning back toward the audience. His expression had shifted, not softened, but more reflective, more grounded. Then he clapped, and within seconds, the entire room erupted again, louder than before. But this wasn't just for Lucas anymore. It wasn't just for the song. It was for every soldier who never got the chance to stand on that stage. What happened next would ensure this moment would be talked about across the country. The event should have moved on, but as Lucas stepped down from the stage, he felt a firm hand on his arm. "Walk with me," Trump said, his voice low but steady. Lucas hesitated only for a second before nodding. The two men moved away from the cameras, away from the speeches and pleasantries. A small group of aides and Secret Service agents hovered nearby, but this conversation needed no audience. Trump turned to Lucas, eyes focused. "That song," he said, pausing. "That wasn't just music. That was—" He stopped, shaking his head slightly as if searching for the right words. Lucas nodded calmly. "It was the truth." Trump exhaled, studying him. "I've met a lot of veterans. I've heard a lot of stories, but I've never heard it put like that." He paused. "You served in Afghanistan?" Lucas shifted slightly, feeling the weight of memories. "Yes, sir. 2 tours. First time I left, I was 22. The second time..." He trailed off. Trump nodded. "And that's when you got hit?" Lucas didn't flinch. "Yes, sir." A beat of silence passed before Trump asked, "Do you still talk to any of the men from your unit?" Lucas's jaw tightened. The ones who made it home. Yes. Too many didn't. The weight of the words hung heavy between them. Trump exhaled slowly. I get criticized a lot. People say I don't understand the military, that I don't feel what they feel. Maybe they're right. He glanced at Lucas. But I listen. And tonight I heard you. Lucas studied him for a long moment. He wasn't sure how to respond to that. Trump continued. This song, this story, people need to hear it. Not just in this room. Not just tonight. He glanced toward one of his aides. Get this out there. Make sure every veteran in this country hears this. Lucas blinked. This wasn't just a conversation anymore. This was something bigger. Within hours, clips of the performance flooded the internet. The video spread across social media, news stations, and morning talk shows. Some headlines called it a powerful tribute. Others labeled it a rare emotional moment for a president often seen as unshakable. But the true impact wasn't in the headlines. It was in the emails and messages Lucas received. Soldiers he had never met, Gold Star families who had lost their loved ones, veterans who had felt invisible until now. It was in the phone calls from men he had served with, voices thick with emotion saying, I needed to hear that. It was in the way one song managed to do what years of speeches couldn't, remind the world of the faces behind the sacrifice. But there was still one more thing Lucas needed to do. The days after the gala were a blur. Lucas Barrett, never one for attention, found his phone constantly buzzing. Veterans, families of fallen soldiers, strangers who had never been to war but felt the weight of his words. Everyone had something to say. Talk shows debated it, news anchors analyzed it, but none of that mattered to Lucas. What mattered were the voices on the other end of the calls. A man from Oklahoma who had lost his younger brother in Afghanistan, a woman from Texas who had served but never felt seen, a father from Ohio who had folded a flag over the coffin of his only son. Every message carried the same theme. Thank you for saying what we couldn't. Amidst the flood of messages, one stood out. It wasn't from a journalist or a politician. It was from Marjorie Tillman, the mother of Private Jason Tillman, a young soldier from Lucas's unit who hadn't made it home. Lucas read her words over and over. I never got to hear my son's voice again, but last night, I heard it in your song. His hands trembled slightly as he typed back, he's never been forgotten. And that's when Lucas knew. This wasn't the end of something. It was the beginning. The next morning, he called the number that had been left in his inbox. Not a media request. Not a politician. But a small nonprofit that helped veterans tell their stories through music. And just like that, one song turned into a movement. Because the truth is, no soldier is ever truly gone as long as their story is told.